All right, welcome back to Prayer of the Barren Womb, part 33. And okay, I'm no playwright. It's funny how the words, as I was writing the dialogue, sounded better than actually speaking the dialogue. So I guess that's one of the things that makes a script writer so good, is when they actually write words that sound like something people would say. But the objective of the dialogue that I created was to stimulate thought, to get you to think about high-minded values or nobility in what Eve thought she was doing when she took of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's my understanding, it's my lead dog in this race, that what she was attempting was something good. She saw the fruit as nourishing, as beautiful, and as wisdom. I mean, think about it. Nourishment, of course. Nourishment is a good thing. We need nourishment. Beauty feeds our soul in the way that nourishment feeds our body. Wisdom, how to conduct ourselves in life, how to be in relationship with others. We need all these things, and every single one of the things that Eve was looking at in the fruit was a good. What she was doing was circumventing God's plan and God's way of bringing humanity in. It's my lead dog, it's my understanding that at some point God would have shared the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with Adam at some point after they had matured to the level of being able to handle this kind of understanding. We don't know. The whole plan was circumvented when Eve took of the fruit and ate it outside of the outside of the guidelines of God's permission for her. We don't know what might have happened had they been able to withhold themselves from taking of the fruit of the tree. But what I wanted to get you to think about was that what she was aiming at wasn't some horror of torture and evil and sorrow and misery and death and suffering and slavery and everything that we see as a result of our own sin nature. That wasn't even in her mind. She was aiming at good things, but going about it in the wrong way. Same thing was going on when when Sarah offered Hagar to Abram. The aim that they had was a child, someone who would inherit it, a child that would inherit the magnificent promises of God that God had given to Abram. Abram had no inheritor. What are these promises going to do? Are they going to end with me? So Sarah and Abraham went about an attempt to achieve an aim that was good, a child who would inherit the promises of God, who would continue to sustain the legacy of Abraham. That's a good thing. They just went about it in the wrong way. And so we see that pattern unfolding throughout human history, is when we aim at good things but go about it outside of the guidelines of God's instructions, what we're going to bring about is going to be suffering, misery, and death, in the same way that Ishmael and Isaac have been in rivalry with each other from the very beginning. And we see the continuation of that rivalry to this very day in the Middle East. So many times, it's the classic quote, the road to hell is paved literally with good intentions. I believe Eve had good intentions in her heart. Abram and Sarah had good intentions in their heart, but it has led humanity down the path to hell. So all that to say, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is filled with objectives that are good. It seems like a pretty good thing to have, knowledge of good and evil. Isn't humanity better off for having an understanding of good and evil? And I would argue that yes, why would God make that off limits? A tree that's beautiful, a tree that's good for nourishment, that will the end of which would be humanity having an understanding of the good and evil. Why is that off limits? It seems like that's a pretty good thing to have. And what happened when we internalized the fruit, when the fruit was external to us, and we honored the boundaries that God had placed around it, good was still objective. We still had an understanding that the Creator had established boundaries around this tree for whatever mysterious reason he had for placing this beautiful tree in the garden and saying it's off limits to you. As long as we were in that state of honoring the boundaries that God had established for us, good and evil was still objective and external. We understood there was a lawgiver. We understood that there was a law, and we understood that there was a focus of that, a means by which we could honor the Creator. As soon as we brought that illegally into ourselves, the serpent wasn't lying when he said, "You will become as God, knowing good and evil." He had an understanding of what would happen when we internalized the objective standard for good and evil. Now would be dissolved, and humanity now would become the means. Our own subjective framework would be the means by which we would understand good and evil. So what has happened now, as a result of Adam and Eve, our parents, internalizing good and evil, the standard for good and evil has become muddied with preference. Subjectivity is now been woven into our understanding of good and evil. So what we desire has become muddied with what is good. And the things that we may desire are pure evil. Maybe we want to redefine what marriage is. Maybe we want to, whatever it is. This is what I feel. And that's what we're manifesting right now at this stage in human history. Nobody can tell anybody else what is right or wrong. Who are you to tell me? Who are you to say what is right and wrong? You don't know me. I want this, and it's good because I want it. So we're manifesting the outworking of the internalization, the subjectification of good and evil. It has now been muddied with our own preferences. And so anybody's preference can now be understood as what is right and what is good for everyone else. And so that's where we are. And that's what I wanted you to understand, and what I wanted to bring forward with the dialogue is that there were high and noble motives in place, and it went sideways. It went wrong so fast. It went bad so fast. It's in terms of epic fails, it's in a class all by its own. The eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil outside of the boundaries and guidelines of the Creator is a failure that all of our human misery and suffering, all the evil that we do, nothing comes close. So I wanted to communicate that, make that very clear. There's no justification for what Eve did. There's the outcome of it. Look at it. The outcome is horror and tragedy all around. So my wife wanted me to make that clear, that there is no justification. But what Eve was doing in her mind, I believe to be kind of this nobility. And the way we get there is by superimposing intertextual stories together. That Abram is a picture of Adam, that Sarah is a picture of Eve. So if we see in Sarah these high and noble motives in offering to Hagar to take something forbidden and offer to her husband in the same pattern that Eve took something forbidden and offered to her husband, that the motives that the story develops for us in the storyline of Sarah and Abraham, we can superimpose those motives over Eve and get a deeper understanding of what Eve was doing. That's all I wanted to communicate. Okay, let's move on now. At the in part 31, not part 32. 32 is the reading of the dialogue. Part 31, I wanted to develop a little bit more thoroughly or deeply, as it was in the days of Lot. Our Master, Yeshua Messiah, warned the terminal generation that signs of his return and of the end of the age would be as it was in the days of Lot, as it was in the days of Noah. And what I suggested, riskily, because we're not to add to or take from the text, and I know that going in. So let the buyer beware. Caution, warning, Will Robinson, okay? Could we add the idea to the text of Luke 17, as it was in the days of Lot, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man? Can we add to that idea, as it was in the days of Abram or Abraham? And the reason why I want to put this as a possibility for us to consider is because the days of Lot are bracketed by the days of Abraham. They're overlaps. Obviously, as it was in the days of Lot, it was also in the days of Abraham that these same events were taking place. And what I want to consider, what I want to throw this out there for you, is the consideration that if we can say that, as it was in the days of Abraham, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man, because Abraham was watching this whole event unfold. What I want to suggest to you as a possibility is, how do we dwell in the tents of Abraham rather than the gates of Sodom? I'd rather be in the tents of Abraham than the gates of Sodom when destruction and judgment comes. And it's coming. You know, I've said this a couple of times, but it bears repeating. You know, if God doesn't judge America, he's going to have to say, I'm sorry to Sodom and Gomorrah. And the judgments of God are true and righteous altogether. And God is not a man that he should change his mind. His judgments will stand. We're on an unsustainable moral trajectory in not only this nation, but in the West, in European countries, in formerly Christian nations. We're on a moral trajectory to anarchy and chaos and total destruction. So that's my understanding. Personally, it'd be wise for me, you know, a wise person sees destruction coming and takes action, takes steps, but a fool just walks right on. If I believe this to be the case in Western nations and in America directly, would it be prudent for me to take steps to hide myself? Yes, I believe that it would be prudent. And so the wisdom that I want is Abraham's wisdom. I don't want to have roots in Sodom when destruction comes. Lot burrowed his root system into the civilization of Sodom and Gomorrah at 1155. He sees with his eyes, he evaluates with his mind, what's the best outcome for me? He takes action. He moves into Sodom and Gomorrah at 1155. You know, just years before the total destruction of the place, total and ultimate destruction and judgment from God, and Lot's moving in there. And Abraham, on the other hand, is standing at a distance, in my opinion, seeing and knowing what we see and know now about our society and its unraveling. I would suggest that it would be wisdom to dwell with Abraham in his tents rather than to move in to Sodom and Gomorrah and burrow roots. So that's what I want to develop as we move forward. And I don't think I have a complete understanding of this, but I want to suggest there are some highlights that we can look at in terms of modeling ourselves after Abraham. And one of the things that sticks out to us right at the start of the story of Abraham in Genesis 11, 26, I believe, is where his story starts. And this wisdom comes to us from Southern House, was that Abraham is beginning to answer the question, am I my brother's keeper? And so he and his brother Nahor stand in for Haran and do this yibum, this proto-yibum, I guess you could call. they stand in, they marry the daughters of Haran in an attempt to continue the name of Haran upon the earth. And as we move forward in the storyline, and as we get all the way to Isaac and Rebekah, we find that the two bloodlines, or the two sides of Haran's bloodline, merge in the children of Jacob and Esau. Abram sends Eliezer, his faithful steward, to back to his family to get a bride for his son Isaac, and Eliezer ends up at Nahor's family, and you read that story in Genesis, 23? I think it starts in 23 and 24, is the acquiring of the bride for Isaac, and he gets the bride of Isaac, Rebekah, from Nahor's family. God just providentially guides Eliezer's steps to this guy's family, acquires for Isaac Rebekah, and these two, the bloodlines merge and bring Haran's name to completion, bring a fulfillment. So, I mean, it's a beautiful story as you look at genealogies and bloodlines, which is typically the most boring thing we can do, right? But there's beautiful stories in there. So anyhow, we see a man who's outside of himself. He's looking upon the needs of others and evaluating those needs and addressing those needs. We find out that one of his key characteristics that the ancients, the sages, Southern House, whatever you want to call them, understood Abraham to be a man of kindness. And so he's constantly looking to care for the needs of others. So how can we begin to model ourselves after Abraham? And I would suggest that that's a step in the right direction, is kindness to the people in our lives, considering their needs and placing the needs of others and those around us in our families and in our close, intimate relationships, considering those needs as having prominence in our own lives is one of the steps that we can take to begin to exit Sodom and to start to live in the tents of Abram as opposed to the gates of Sodom. So we have selflessness. Another feature that we see about Abram is he's quick to obey. I mean, many times you see God asking of Abraham these hard things, and, first thing in the morning, the ultimate story of obedience is what's called the Akedah. The Akedah is the offering of Isaac, taking your son, your only son, and bringing him to a place that I will show you, and offering him there to me. And Abram, boom, next morning, he and his boy, down the road. So you see this quick to obey. You see, how does a person get there? How do you get there? How do you stop tinkering with your own sin and your own desires and become someone who's quick to obey? These are good meditations. These are good questions. And I'm not even suggesting that I'm there, right? I'm just suggesting that there's a path, there is a way through coming judgment, and that is to uproot yourself. If you find yourself rooted to this world, if you find yourself rooted in the chase for riches and mansions and Mercedes and whatever else, if you're chasing the buck now, at this time in human history, I would suggest you consider. Of course, we need to provide for our families, but these are the questions that we need to begin to consider and evaluate the path of our own lives. Because there's change that's coming. And I think everybody feels it. I think everybody can feel this. Things aren't right. Things are just not right here. And I believe that there's this kind of like background buzzing, unsettling feeling that I think people just know. People just know that we're about to turn a corner and it doesn't look good. So untethering yourself from the world, how do we begin to do this? I believe that Abram models this with some of the events that we see quickly, like the first thing that God promises him is a great nation, a great name. And what does Abram do? He lives in tents. He doesn't build a castle, he builds altars. So altars, what is the building of an altar to Yahovah? I think it begins with just meditating upon his word, meditating, thinking deeply, going into these questions that I'm hoping you'll consider for yourself, thinking deeply on the things of God, thinking deeply on his word, and prayer, and sacrifice, the giving of yourself to the purposes of God. These are some of the things that can begin to detach us, that we would not be tethered to this world and its systems and its thinking. So, what else do we got? Prayer. Yeah, I think we'll go into prayer right now. All right. We left off kind of with Genesis chapter 17, and this is an additional echo, an echo from the garden and the flood, and the echo continues in chapter 17 with following a garden temptation event. You have a covenant event. And in Genesis 17, we get, following in pattern, Adam was given the covenant of Sabbath. Noah was given the covenant of the rainbow. Abram is given the covenant of circumcision. And so following that circumcision, that Brit, that's the Hebrew word, Brit, that Abram does, he actually circumcised himself. Wow, that's an astonishing act of obedience. Okay, you're an old man. Apparently, he's about 99 years old right now. This is before antibiotics or painkillers or anything like that. He actually circumcises himself. And I actually think he did it to himself first. He gathered the men of his tribe and said, the Creator has said to me, that this is the sign of the covenant will be in our flesh. Now it's your time to decide if you're all in with my family. And I'm suggesting that he probably gave men the right to choose to move forward with him and to be in covenant with the Creator. If it's move forward time, it's circumcision time. And so as an old man, I'm visualizing it, and circumcises himself. Ew, man, I think about me doing this on myself. Oh my gosh. I mean, what an amazing act of obedience this would have been. And so the sages understand that chapter 18 of Genesis follows about 3 days after the circumcision of the family and the camp of Abraham. And so Abraham is in the worst of conditions right now. He's in a tremendous amount of pain. He's probably feverish. We know that the results of circumcision later on in the book of Genesis, by doing it as an adult, it's pretty hard on you. So Abraham would have been really suffering on the third day of his circumcision event. And this is when the Lord decides to show up. In Genesis chapter 18, and we have, then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in his tent door in the heat of the day. The understanding is that he must have been just miserable, feverish, in pain, just like, oh, everybody go away. Don't, and we would have understood that if he didn't want to entertain guests right now, it would have been justified. But what does he do in this condition in which we find him? So he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him, and when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. Okay, things are sore down there. Things are really hurting right now. He ran to the guests and bowed himself down to the ground. And he said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please, let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. Afterward you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant." And they said, "Do as you have said." So Abram hurried into the tent of Sarah and said, "Quickly, make 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." And Abram, everywhere Abraham is going, he's running. Okay, he's in this condition of tremendous pain. Everywhere he's going, he's hurrying. Quickly, do this. He's running to the herd to get a good calf. He gave it to the young man, and he hastened to prepare it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Okay, so this act of tremendous kindness and service to strangers, I believe, is where we get in James, I think it's in James, where James says, take care to entertain strangers, because you don't know when you might be entertaining an angel unaware. This is the storyline of showing kindness to strangers. And this is unprecedented act of kindness and to strangers when you're at your worst. Okay, so this story is really amazing when you consider it. And what's interesting is the result of this kindness leads to the birth of Isaac. And again, this was brought to my attention through the teaching of Southern House. I'd never heard this in the churches, but there's this resonance, this echoes. Kindness to strangers leads to fertility and children. This isn't the only time this has happened. We find a parallel story in the story of Elijah, or is it Elisha? Oh gosh, this is popping into my head, and I should have been better prepared. But you have this barren woman, this old couple, realizing that a man of God is making his way through their town. And she says to the husband, "Listen, there's a man of God who keeps passing through our town. Why don't we make him an upper room? Why don't we prepare a place for him to spend the night, to eat meals, to refresh himself?" So the husband says, "Yeah, sure, that's great, good idea." So they do this kindness for, I think it's Elijah, yeah, because he's got his servant Gehazi. Yeah, Elijah. So they prepare a room, and this kindness is noticed by Elijah, and he says, "What can we do for you?" And the woman says, "I'm fine, it's all good. Don't worry about it, we got you." And Gehazi makes mention, and he says, "You know what? They're childless." Bingo. Okay, excellent, Gehazi. This time next year, you're going to have a child. Okay, so this theme, this echo of kindness to strangers leading to children echoes itself. And so it's very interesting, these parallels that you find in Scripture and these nuggets, these treasures that are hidden there for us to consider. So if there is a couple who stumbles upon my channel, who's having a problem with fertility, a good place to start might be sharing your dinner table with strangers, inviting your neighbors in. I don't know, just a thought. But anyhow, we have this incredible act of kindness that's mentioned for us in Genesis chapter 18, resulting in Abram and Sarah now being able to conceive, and Isaac being brought forth into the world. And then we have the laughter of Sarah. Therefore, just reading forward. Then as they're enjoying this meal with Abram, and Abram is standing to attend to their every need, then they said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" So he said, "Here in the tent." And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son." Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abram and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. And the Lord said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh? Oh, no, I just skipped a verse. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh, saying, surely I shall bear a child since I am old. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. So you get this, I don't know, it's this beautiful little exchange. And I just think the tenderness of the Lord, there's just such a beautiful engagement between the Lord and his children. And anyhow, I find myself refreshed from these stories. And then we go on to this strange bargaining. The Lord revealed, he goes on to say, then the men arose and looked toward Sodom, and Abram went with them to send them on their way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abram what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, and that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And the Lord said to him, behold, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, because their sin is very grave. I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Then the men turned away. And then you have this strange bargaining interaction that's going on between Abram and the Lord, where he starts at 50 and bargains all the way down to 10. And it's like 6 steps of bargaining. It goes from 50 to 40 to 30, or what is it? I think it goes from 50 to, if there are 50 righteous, 40, 30, 20, 10. So, I mean, he steps that, if there are 10 righteous, and he intuits that he's got to stop there. But what is Abram really doing here? And this goes back to the question, how can we untether ourselves from our attachments to the world and dwelling in the gates of Sodom when it's about to be judged and destroyed, and to begin our journey toward the tent of Abraham? I think this is one of the key steps. What is Abraham really doing here? He knows his nephew Lot has chosen Sodom and Gomorrah as his dwelling place. So is Abraham, I believe what's going on right here is he is interceding on behalf of Lot. We know from the story that Lot has 4 daughters. So Lot and his wife and his 4 daughters, well, that makes up 6 people. Perhaps Abram is thinking that Lot has married his 4 daughters to 4 husbands, which makes our total of 10. That's a speculation. But we know that 2 of Lot's daughters have not been married yet, and so he has only 8. The city cannot be spared. There are not 10 righteous within the city. And so, not finding what God agreed to, Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed. But one of the things that I believe this bargaining session is actually showing us is that the intercession of Abram is for Lot. That Abraham has never stopped thinking about Lot. That Abraham has never stopped praying for Lot. And what we're seeing right here is intercession on behalf of Lot, that Lot would be spared. And I think I'll leave it there right now. This thing is going long again, and I don't want to find myself blathering. But consider for yourself how important it is if you believe that there are attachments in your own life that are tethering you to Sodom. Ask the Lord to show you those things. Ask the Lord to reveal to you where you have become tethered to Sodom. Are there things in this life that you would miss if they were destroyed? Obviously, of course, there are things in this life that we will miss. But I mean, is it Chick-fil-A? You know, is it your fried foods that, you know, it's like, is it your appetite? You know, so these are the things that can tether us without our even noticing, because they're just habitual. They're just a part of our daily life. You know, are we going to mourn the loss of all of our fried foods when it happens? Well, think on that. Pray on that. Perhaps one of the means by which we can untether ourselves is fasting. Not that I'm a saint or a monk, or, you know, I'm preaching to myself here. But since appetite is such a powerful theme in all these human failures, the restriction from appetite, putting limits on our own appetite, are, I believe, going to be a valuable tool for us as we detach from this world and move into the tents of Abraham. Okay, we'll continue with our storyline. I'm not moving very quickly towards the four rivers of Eden, but this is just, I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying the things that I'm seeing in the scripture, and I hope you are too. And if you are, I'll see you on my next portion, episode 34 of the Four Rivers of Eden. Thank you for your time.